my name is Beverley Walker, and I live in Georgia. I presently work for the Georgia Fire Academy as a training instructor. I have a pretty long background in fire and emergency services, about 30 years with a couple of different departments, and most of that time I spent doing prevention type work. Community risk reduction is it is an integrated approach to community safety in the sense of it is not simply just prevention and mitigation. It is a lot of proactive type of work in the community. It's targeted and focused where we look at each individual community and what's going on in that community, what the risk issues are there and who they're happening to, and try to focus on that particular audience or that particular risk issue. It's one that involves everybody in the whole organization. And I like to say it is almost a philosophy, as much as it is a process, which it is very much a process, but it is just a whole way of thinking of getting ahead of the problems in our community. One of the things that community risk reduction, the whole process allows us to do is stay on top of certain risk issues in the community, where we can, through risk reduction, we can constantly be updating our data, updating risk issues, even different target audiences that may be affected by those risk issues. So it really has seen a lot of growth. In some organizations, it may be it may be just a small part of what they do. In other organizations, they're probably doing community risk reduction and they don't really realize it. Well, the department that I used to work for, and we had a large lake in the area, and of course, drowning was a problem. It was a problem for those stations that were close to the lake. The stations on the other side of the county weren't involved in the drowning prevention at all because that wasn't a risk issue for them. That wasn't part of their service area problem. And so when we began to target this drowning program or this drowning problem, we looked at the data, which is one of the first steps in the risk reduction process, to see who was drowning, who was being affected by this. And we found out that it was people that were coming to visit that lake, not necessarily that lived in our county, but also it was, the 20 to 30-year-old, whereas it wasn't kids. So we began to target that particular age group and to do some programs at the lake. We had handout cards that we would give that were in English and another language to address our populations that would visit the lake. We had what we called life jacket loaner stations, which were built and had life jackets on them so people could borrow them and bring them back, which they did. We had a marine rescue boat on the lake that was trained and ready to go in the case of a drowning situation. We had an enforcement piece through the local law enforcement on the lake that were on patrol, that were targeting people that didn't have life jackets and that may be boating under the influence. And so it was a very targeted and focused approach. As an example, it involved everybody. It's not just about one person or one division at the fire organization. Everybody plays a role. So that's one of the things that I've seen is in community risk reduction. It allows us to adapt to an issue that may be on the uprise in our community, or that just kind of all of a sudden pops up and it may have the attention of the public. Maybe it was something that's been around. Youth fire setting is another one that comes to mind, where it's kind of been around, but a lot of communities now are really taking note of that and working towards that. The first place I think people have to begin is in understanding what community risk reduction does or is and what it does. And understanding that it's what helps us to meet our mission as a fire service organization. Most organizations have something related to community risk reduction in their mission statements, and that people have to understand that it's not just about prevention. It is about involving the community and integrating with the community to help meet their needs. As a fire chief, fire chief has to be the leader in many ways. Doesn't have to be the person that maybe the catalyst in the organization, but that chief has to support that what is going on in the organization. I see it as a creating that culture, and for some organizations, it is a cultural shift. The fire service has always been a reactive organization, and this is very different from that. But I think as we see the value in it, and as a chief can see the value in it's cost effective, it's going to mean a better use of equipment and time and resources to simply do community risk reduction. That there's some buy-in there, and to me, that's one of the biggest things is getting buy-in throughout the organization of what it looks like for them in their area. But when that family that experiences the fire is standing on the curb where their smoke alarm has alerted them and they practice their home escape plan, then we as firefighters don't have to make that hard decision of risking a lot to save a lot. It's so much better. And I try to share with the recruits that I get to work with that we may have signed up to fight fire, but I didn't sign up for the deaths and injuries that can occur as a result of a hostile fire. I didn't sign up for that. And I don't think I've done my job when that happens. If our job is to save lives and protect property, then when there's a fire, we failed. I actually had the occasion to teach a class a couple of weeks ago about CRR, and it was a really great group of people because there was honestly no prevention type people in there. There were some chiefs, there was some deputy chiefs, there was a fire marshal or two, but there was it was a very varied background, and a year or two ago, I don't think we would have seen that.